this is Vijay once again, and today I'm going to read newspapers, and that is Al Jazeera, one of the prominent newspaper across the world and dominating position right now. And they are also publishing news with 0% partiality, so that's a good sign. So I would like to read opinion piece from Al Jazeera, and it's about the Europe and Russia relation. So it's an opinion piece. Can European Union and Russia relations be repaired post Putin? Putin's decisions making has set Russia down a path that any successor would find difficult to turn from. A year after Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the debate about whether this is President Vladimir Putin's war or not continues. Anti-war Russians, many of whom have sought refuge outside the country, blame the Russian president. For them, his delusions and paranoia have caused a turn to neo-totalitarianism at home and military aggressions abroad. The Russian opposition in exile and in prison insists that if Putin is to fall from power, the situation would reverse. Leonid Volkov, the number 2 of imprisonment, opposition leader Alexei Navalny, has even suggested that following the end of the war, the West should offer a Marshall Plan, not only for Ukraine in dire need of reconstruction, but also for Russia. In other words, opposition minded Russian hope that Moscow will rebuild bridges with Europe and the US once Putin is no longer on the throne. Understandably, the notion of Putin's war has next to no purchase in Ukraine itself. By and large, Ukrainians fault Russia as a country and as a society, whether it is in xenogoistic cheerleaders for Moscow's special military operations or the silent majority who choose to simply ignore it and get on with their daily lives. Why should Russia be trusted to behave differently one day? They ask, given that Putin speaks for a nation with an imperial mindset. Besides, a successor to the 70 years old leader is unlikely to come from the pro-Western opposition or be any different from the current occupant of the Kremlin. Some of the names pundits speculate about, say, head of the Russia Security Council, Nikolai Pastrov, are at least as hawkish as Putin. So for Ukrainians, Russia has to be defeated, no matter who runs the show in Moscow. But what about the European Union? Has the war moved its relation with Russia? This is now the question. Cultivated so carefully for long and past point of no return. For Poland and the Baltic states that is very much the case. For a year now, they have had their told you so moment. Even before Russian invasion last year and the occupation Crimea 2014, they made the case that Russian revanchism poses a fundamental threat to the post-Cold War modern in Europe. To the West, France and Germany, however, have been much more ambitious in their approach to relation with Russia from the moment he first assumed office in 2017. French President Emmanuel Macron has been making a case that Europe should think about the long term and engage the Russian. Macron stuck to this line pretty much until the invasion and kept calling Putin in the hope of working out a diplomatic solution of some sort. And as recently as December, the French president spoke of security guarantees to Russia that should be part of settlement. Germany has elicited even more frustration and ire among Eastern Europe friends of Ukraine. Long years of causing up to the Russian and business come political ventures such as the Nord Stream gas line have tainted its record. The German political class has long seen Russia as a friend, and some, like former Chancellor Gerhard Schröder, landed lucrative gigs with Moscow state-run energy companies. In the past year, there has been some changes in action and rhetoric. In wake of invasion, Chancellor Olaf Scholz declared the so-called Zeitenwende, the historic turning point, the idea that Berlin will finally take European defense seriously and put its weight behind it, both financially and politically. His position has found support among the German public, the majority of which is pro-Ukraine too. However, the German bias towards hugging closely Russia in the expectation that denser ties will yield greater security and predictability has not been relegated to the past. With Scholz dragging his feet on providing military aid to Ukraine, notably on the Leopard tanks, he is signaling that the German leadership has not given up on Moscow altogether. In Germany's logic, Russia will always be there, whether we like it or not, and we cannot simply shut it down, build a fence around it, or ignore it. Of course, the more charitable interpretation of the tank tussle is that Scholz' gambit aimed at committing the US to European security with 2024 US president elections looming on the horizon. But even so, it is safe to assume that the Germans will not be in the avant-garde of the Stop Russia and coalition going forward. So then does the lack of full alignment on Russia mean that the European Union is leaving the door open for normalization of relationship in the long term? Not exactly. The war may and probably will last here. So long as there is fighting, it is hard to envisage any forms of productive diplomatic engagement, let alone rekindling political and economic links. Certainly, until Putin is in office, relations will be confrontational. In case of de-escalation, a new line will be drawn across Eastern Europe, leaving Ukraine and possibly Moldova and Georgia on the western side, Belarus on Russia's, and Armenia and Azerbaijan in no man's land. A Cold War-like scenario will materialize, with the pro-Western countries drawn into European Union and NATO's orbit, and Russia entrenching itself in whatever parts of Ukraine it might succeed to keep. This also means that Cold War style diplomacy will be deployed. The European Union and its ally, the US, will engage with Russia only in order to preserve stability and avoid a full frontal collision. The essence of Western policy will be containment, not integration, as was the case in the 1990s and 2000s. The war has taken heavy toll on economic links between Russia and the Europe, and Putin's policy choices have accelerated forces that any future leader might struggle to reverse. Moscow used to be one of the main energy suppliers to the Union. It is no more and is likely to recover its position. The Russian share of the European gas imports has gone down from 50% in 2021 to meager 12.9% at present. The European sanctions have forced Russia to gravitate towards China, and to some extent the global south. This will be one of the worst lasting legacies. Anti-Putin Russian hope that their country may eventually find its way back to the West. European leaders are right to think long and hard about what comes after the fighting stops, as sooner or later it will. Yet, as history shows, war are transformative events. For better or worse, the clock will not turn back to February 23, 2022. This was the views expressed in these articles are the author own and do not necessarily reflect Al Jazeera editorial stand. That means this is the writings of a editorial. This is nothing to do with the Al Jazeera's own opinion. So that's kind of explanations given by a editorial writers. So